the airport protests spread.
If these people are serious about doing anything about carbon footprint, they should look to some of the other industries that contribute a large proportion of carbon emissions, like power stations.
10 people have been arrested after climate change protesters held demonstrations against private air travel. One group blocked access to Biggins Hill Airport in Kent, while another targeted Farnborough Airport in Hampshire. A spokesperson said the action was connected to the climate change camp at Heathrow.
Climate change protesters who chained themselves to an airport main terminal gates have been arrested. Not at Heathrow. These arrests were at a much smaller airport in Biggins Hill in Kent. Our reporter John Andrew is there. John?
Yes, Eddie, the main entrance is now clear for passengers to come and go. A very different story this morning, though, at about 6:45, when around a dozen campaigners turned up and began chaining themselves to the main gates. Now, around 7 attached themselves to the gates, 2 of them by looping bicycle chain locks around their necks, 4 more by lying down in front in a sort of human chain linked by yellow metal tubing. Now, police were very quickly on the scene, but it was all terribly polite, with one officer asking protesters what their intentions were.
Our intentions are to stay here and stop as many people getting into the airport to take their private flights.
Is this just going to be for today or for several days? Or?
Guys, what do you reckon? We should do everything by consensus. Today or several days, as long as it takes.
Well, with no sign of the protesters budging, out came a team armed with specialist cutting equipment, and one by one those chained to the gates were cut loose and arrested. The human chain in front proved more difficult. Police had to cut through the yellow tubing very carefully indeed. They couldn't be sure where their arms and fingers were, but eventually they were all cut loose, led away and arrested, and all for aggravated trespass. They said they targeted Biggins Hill because of the growth of executive jet travel, which they said mocked the efforts of others trying to reduce their carbon footprint. Tamsin Omond spoke for the group.
I don't think that there is a bigger threat to worldwide security than climate change at the moment. We want short-haul flights to be stopped. We want there to be no more airport expansion. Ultimately, we want no more planes in the sky.
Now, the airport, which describes itself as London's premier airport for executive travellers, said that even though their main gate was shut for the best part of 3 hours, there'd been no disruption to flights. They went on as normal. The airport's director, Peter Lonergan, said he was puzzled that Biggins Hill had been targeted.
Aviation contributes about 3% to carbon emissions. Business aviation is a very small fraction of that, and business aviation is less than 0.5%. If these people are serious about doing anything about carbon footprint, they should look to some of the other industries that contribute a large proportion of carbon emissions, like power stations.
Now, most of the police here today were from Operation Hargood, the Scotland Yard team now policing that big climate change camp at Heathrow. Today's group, calling themselves the Jet Threaters, said they have connections with the Heathrow camp. So I asked Chief Inspector Ian Gallihawk, who oversaw today's police operation, whether he feared that, frustrated by large police numbers at Heathrow, protesters would now choose more of these smaller airports outside the capital.
I wouldn't use the term fear. There's always a possibility that could happen, that there are possibilities that other things could happen. We have the contingencies in place, and as you saw by our response today, we are ready to respond.
Now, there was no use of anti-terrorism powers today. The arrests were made under the Criminal Justice and Public Order Act, as I say, for aggravated trespass. There was another protest today at Farnborough Airport in Hampshire. No one chained themselves to gates there, and there were no arrests. Eddie.
John Andrew.